Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. On the show tonight, and the DA's Education Shadow Minister.
I want leaks closed in Nelson Mandela, and if by Friday we haven't done that, I'm telling you.
But can the Water Affairs Minister deliver on that threat if the Nelson Mandela Metro doesn't play ball? We speak to Senzo Mchunu at the end of yet another one of his visits in as many weeks as he tries to help the municipality avoid day zero. With just over a month to go before Marikana massacre victims, survivors and their families gather to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the tragedy, we hear from people who have their ears on the ground, especially after last week's High Court ruling, which found that President Cyril Ramaphosa does have a case to answer. All that and more in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Minister of Water Affairs and Sanitation Senzo Mchunu says much progress has been made to avert day zero in Nelson Mandela Bay, home to more than 1.2 million South Africans. The minister rounded off a two-day visit to the metro, where the combined dam levels are currently standing at 14.54%.
The Churchill Dam, a critical water source for the metro, currently at 17.14% of capacity. It dipped below the 10% level last month, but some good rain at the end of June is making a difference. However, the rain did not alleviate the crisis much. The combined dam levels currently sit at 14.54%.
So this is reality once more, that we have a problem that is rather intensifying than abating, which then means that we need to go back to the metro and use this understanding and intensify our campaign. Maybe that in the next few days or a week or so, we'll be having a strategic session with the metro on medium to long term, but we'll also have to start from what we are seeing now, because there were comments when we were here about what has been happening in terms of the metro's management of this dam in the past 3 years, about valves, about non-compliance issues, but also about the alien plants that are all over here.
The extraction pump barge on the Mpofu Dam is also in the process of being moved to enable further extraction, as the dam is at 10% of its capacity.
The original barge at Mpofu has been on the barge for more than a year, almost 2 years already, and we've been extracting on average between 30 and 40 megalitres per day from that position. The dam level has receded so far that we had to stop using that barge at the moment, and we're in the process of dismantling it, or not completely dismantling it, but reposition it to an area where there is a deeper area from which we can then extract more water. So that is the one part of the plan, and the other part of the plan, as we are at Churchill Dam, as we will bring one of the barges here as well as an emergency intervention. So although the dam is raised from 7% to 16% here at Churchill, we will have that barge on standby also if things don't go well on this dam as well.
Minister Mchunu plans to return in 2 weeks' time to evaluate the progress made by the metro to avert day zero. Lerato Fekisi, SABC News, Gqeberha.
Well, Minister Mchunu joins us on the line. Good evening, Minister. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the audience, the citizens of the country, and everybody listening.
The situation is apparently getting better, but the people of that metro more than 1.2 million South Africans aren't out of the woods just yet.
Yes, I would say so, improving just a little bit. But I must emphasize that it's an improvement at a lower level. When we are improving, but at a lower level. Because we are talking about drought that has been hitting that municipality for the last 7 years. Although it rained a little bit when we were there in June, and when we left this afternoon, it also rained. But all of it at a very low level, and the worry remains as strong as it did when we started. And it's a serious and dire situation, and it requires the understanding, it requires activism, it requires serious attention and contribution by all of us in Nelson Mandela.
Let's put the drought issue aside for a second, because you also, in that insert we just played, alluded to conversations, people talking about how water has been or is being managed, especially over the past 3 years. What did you hear? What are people raising as contributing factors to this imminent crisis?
Well, we went to the dam, and this dam, Churchill Dam, is a municipal dam. It's not a national government department dam. And we're quite a group of leadership and workers, both nationally and our office provincially, and part of those were those who work for the municipality. Now, we had a conversation close to an hour, just on the banks of the dam. Now, somebody makes a statement and say, if we had or the municipality had managed this dam properly for the last 3 years, 2 to 3 years, we probably wouldn't be in a situation in which we are at the moment now, 2 years back. And I say, what do you mean? And then he says, no, we have been holding meetings with the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality over the 2 years, issuing non-compliance notices to them about what they need to do to manage the dam and manage water in the dam. In the context of this drought, in the context also of what looks like high usage of water by the residents in Nelson Mandela for residents who are running out of water as a result of this drought. There haven't been compliances, and over quite a long time, as they say, and they talk about management of valves, which they say they have a general feeling, although we're not talking evidence at that time, that the general feeling is that the dam could be managed better. And the valves, that includes operating valves, the way they should. But also on managing the dam itself, it has something to do with how much water do you abstract from this dam for usage by citizens and business on each day in a situation of this nature. So I took that note very seriously. But plus, there's also a concern about alien plants as you go up the dam, which are a source of concern because they suck quite substantial amount of water, and there's evidence that they are quite detrimental to water levels and so on. So it's a situation that we are taking up, and are saying that in the workshop that we're going to have, a strategy workshop, which we're going to have anyway, on medium term to long term strategies to deal with Nelson Mandela Bay and the ongoing drought. We will include the current situation for quite some time. And it's a concerning situation. The good thing, on the other hand, is that Mayor was there, MMC for water was there, Head of Water and Sanitation in Gqeberha was there, and all of us were there. And we all agree that we are together in this. We've got to manage water upwards, not downwards. And it's everybody's issue, and it's a very important issue.
But I mean, there's clearly a serious leadership, management a problem, and a big one at that. And clearly, we're talking about people who have not been listening to people who are giving them advice or who are pointing out the, whether it's the wrongs or the limitations in how water is being managed there. The fact that, to move with speed in, for example, dealing with the leaks that are all over the place, it has had to take a minister to come from Gauteng, to descend on the on the metro. Is that particular issue being addressed? What happens, when you are not there, or there's not been as much focus on this matter? Emerging
from our two-day summit this year in February in Galaga Estates, with everybody in the sector on 18th and 19th, we were clear that we have to intervene on water where municipalities that are water service authorities are in charge, because evidence was suggesting that they have a problem. They themselves admitted that we have a problem of capacity, we have a problem of skills, numbers of people who work there, their skills, and all other related matters. They admitted. Evidence is there. And we're clear that we are going to have to change the situation of Department of Water and Sanitation nationally and water boards operating only at a national level, dealing with bulk water, as the talk was dominant at that time, and to say, look, let's go down, let us deal with water, not just bulk water as separate from reticulation from which people down there drink. They don't drink from dams, they don't drink from large pipes that we say we're managing. They drink from water reticulated to their homes and to their communal centers where water can be found. And therefore, let's manage the whole chain. Let's deal with the whole chain, all of us, especially because municipalities get challenged, and right now, everybody is aware that there are many challenges that the local government level sphere has. And part of what they have to do is to manage water and sanitation and get water to people. It's a job that they are at various levels in terms of dealing with. But by and large, in the majority of cases, it's such that we just have to go and work with them. And so it's no longer an issue that minister will have to go to Gqeberha or go to any other place. We just have to accept that if we want to meet the constitutional obligations where water is a right and where water is life, and we want to actually deal with these grievances that people have all over, we're going to have to leave these cocoons, these barriers, and just deal with provision of water to people of South Africa. That's why, yeah, I mean,
you're talking about, I just want to you're talking about skills and expertise, and that being part of the problem. A couple of weeks ago, we had here on the program the Deputy Minister of Finance, was talking about just some of the origins of some of these problems, that they are not, it's not that these municipalities can't afford or can altogether afford the skills and expertise that they need for things like, water, sanitation, electricity, and so on. It's the choices that the politicians in particular continue to make. An example was, I think it was Mangaung, where they don't have engineers, and the like, who are supposed to deal with these problems. But if you go to their offices, they're stuffed with advisor for this, advisor for that. In other words, political choices have actually been made by those who take decisions. Choices that don't help with service delivery.
That is part of the culture, that observation, because it is valid. That has to change, and it has to change now. But it is coupled also with performance. So you could have people who have skills, you could have people who have knowledge and experience, but only to find that performance is very low. I've gone to municipalities to fix water for quite some time, since we were appointed in August last year. And you find that there is just water gushing, and then you deal with the matter, and 2 days later you get pictures and messages that that problem has been fixed. And when you came there, it was like it is above everybody who is there. So it's performance that we need to lay emphasis on. But of course, we need skilled people, because it is clear. Water management is a science. Both services and water resources management, both resources management and services management is quite an advanced scientific activity, and therefore you can't do without knowledge. You can't make guess all the time, think all the time without specific relevant knowledge. That's why even in boards, when we appoint CEOs of boards, we want to emphasize that they should have the highest level of skills, like civil engineering and other qualifications going up, because it's simply, you see, going forward, there are many people, most of the people in South Africa have to drink from the pipe. Mm-hmm. It's no longer going back, the situation is no longer going back to the river, where you would find people getting water from the river in rural areas everywhere. And we're not going to be differentiating between people who are in rural areas and say, no, those don't need piped water, those don't need clean water. That time is gone forever. Minister? Everybody needs clean water, everybody. So it's skills that need to be in service of the people of South Africa, urban and rural, everywhere.
Quick last one, Minister. In addition to skills and expertise problems, there is, of course, the big issue of aging infrastructure. This was raised in Nelson Mandela Bay. Of course, the situation in Nelson Mandela Bay was brought to prominence by the threat of day zero. But we've seen in places like eThekwini, for example, where there were serious problems, hospitals were affected, which meant that people's lives, were at stake. Is there a plan, very briefly, to deal with the maintenance of this of water infrastructure broadly or generally?
We are from Mangaung. I think 2 months ago. We are from Machabeng a month ago. As an example, out of 11 pumps in Machabeng, only one was working. This is wastewater, which means that infrastructure wasn't really getting the attention that it would have required. And you are counting at eThekwini, you are counting almost all the cities in the country of that particular problem. It's no longer a question of aging infrastructure. It's a real question of aged or aged infrastructure, because it's old and it's leaking everywhere. We lose more than 40% of water in this country And somebody told me, for instance, that, these different cities, there's a city that is up to 52% in terms of losses of water, which itself is a commodity that is getting scarcer and scarcer because we're a water scarce country. We know that. So what then is the approach? The approach is this. DWS is making an assessment of infrastructure throughout the country, although we take it case by case at the moment. We are going to, as we finish in that area or city or town, we then get to engage with those people to say, this is our report on your infrastructure, give us yours. And then we compare. And then we get to work in terms of fixing that. Okay. Because these things have been spoken about. I mean, most of the mayors in the country, they start their conversation by saying that aging infrastructure, then they go on capacity. I mean, it's as if being mayor, you have to describe problems rather than, or as opposed to dealing with the problems. And that we need to change that approach. Okay. But we can't change it when just pointing from a distance. That's why we want to go to the ground and are dealing with them. And we've been to quite a number of districts, and we're engaging with them almost every week, or depending on the situation. And that is the trend. That is our plan. Intervene, engage, and work on plans, specific plans for that particular area. And then you fix these problems. There's no other way. Mm-hmm.
Minister, we're going to leave it there for this evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Water and Sanitation Minister on the back of that trip he just completed at Nelson Mandela Bay, the metro there facing, of course, day 0. There have been improvements, according to him, but very, very slight improvements that are not going to make much of a difference, really, as things stand. Up next.
This is exactly what the ANC is trying to do to our schools. To take the few remaining schools that are working and break them too.
You might think it's not even South Africa. You might think it's Orania, where other people can't be in that particular school. Should we fold our arms because we're scared of DA and whatever school or something?
A war of words has erupted between the Democratic Alliance and education authorities over school language proposals. Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi and the DA's Shadow Minister for Education are my next guests. Welcome back. DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille today led a protest outside the offices of the Gauteng MEC of Education, Panyaza Lesufi. The party believes the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, otherwise known as the Bella Bill, will allow the department to make decisions pertaining to the admission and language policy of schools. The DA says the move is an attempt by the ANC to attack mother tongue education, especially Afrikaans.
The political party described this bill as school capture, as it will allow the department a means to make decisions pertaining to the admission and language policy of schools. The DA is of the view that the governing party is attacking mother tongue education, especially Afrikaans, and will destroy our schools through the said bill.
This is exactly what the ANC is trying to do to our schools. To take the few remaining schools that are working and break them too. We, even more than the ANC, want excellent education for all our children. And we want the supply of good schools to meet the demand for good schools. And the real point of attack is on language. We know that Mr. Lesufi blames all the problems of South Africa on a small minority who believe, like many of us, that mother tongue education is the best way for children to learn.
Gauteng MEC of Education, Panyaza Lesufi, however, called the DA's picket opportunistic, citing that he is not the person that promulgated the law, but his own views will be known. He clarified that it was a national bill that was not exclusive to the province of Gauteng, and it is not designed to attack mother tongue education. Lesufi added that we must reject the notion that schools only belong to one race.
all these schools belongs to our children. And any person that thinks that the color of their skin will give them a benefit to a certain school and exclude other people, it will never happen. It will never happen. And it must be clear. And we are very strong on that particular point. So they must go to the minister. They must not come to my office. It's not me who promulgated the law.
According to the Gauteng MEC of Education, this bill must be defended by all patriots, as it will open the doors of learning to everyone, regardless of religion, language or culture. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, let's welcome my guest, the MEC for Education, Panyaza Lesufi, and DA's Shadow Minister of Education, Baxolile Notata. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Yes, MEC, you may not have been the one who promulgated this bill, but you are appraised, you know what its intention is.
Thanks. Let me also greet Mr. Notata. It's just unfortunate that there's a serious misunderstanding, Voyo. This bill is meant to implement a constitutional court judgment. There was a judgment by former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke that outlined the final arbiter or the final decision maker when it comes to school admissions, and explicitly indicated that the head of department of a province are responsible for admissions policies. And this bill, therefore, it's meant to incorporate that view. So it's nothing, it's not me, it's a constitutional court judgment that wanted or proposed that. Secondly, for a bill to be tabled in Parliament, all the MECs must concur or support. As far as I'm concerned, there's no single MEC, including the MEC for Education of Western Cape, that objected to the bill when it was presented. And for the bill to arrive at us, it goes through a huge list of education stakeholders, SGB formations, and other organizations, student, teacher formations. None of those formations objected. And if another political party will come and say, we are taking powers from the SGBs, when SGB formations themselves didn't reject this particular bill, it's troublesome and worrying. Thirdly, the notion that this bill is taking away the rights of SGBs in terms of language, it's not true. And that mother tongue education will be targeted. It's not true. And they know they're just using it as a scare tactic to avoid a very important element of social cohesion, of building a truly non-racial education sector. There is no way that as a country can say we want a non-racial South Africa when it doesn't start in the classrooms. When you say in the classrooms, learners must be separated on the color of the skin and the language they speak, but when they go to university, they must go into the same lecture hall. We can't allow that. So anyone that wants to object to this particular bill, they must not use scare tactics. They must follow organizations like Equal Education, Section 27. They've made a submission and they reject this notion that this bill is about exclusion of a certain group on language or admissions. If you can read the submission made by truly education institutions like SGB's Education, SSA, Section 27, Equal Education, this argument that is presented by the DA, it's not there. So we want to come to you to reject that I stand against Africans, I stand against mother tongue languages. I will never do that. And I will be the first one to support. What I reject is that you can have only one school dedicated to only one language. You can have an Afrikaans class in class B, an English class in class A, as a Xhosa class in class C. And during school break, these children play soccer together or rugby or any other sporting together. And that's the argument we are putting, because we have a responsibility to build a truly non-racial South Africa.
Mr. Notata, how does what MEC Lesufi has just described amount to an attack on mother tongue? How does it amount to capture of schools, especially if, as he says, it's by the order of the court?
No, good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to your viewers as well. I think we must make a very huge distinction between powers of school governing bodies and the arbiter when there's a certain case or a complaint that has been laid against a school that may be using those policies to exclude certain learners. I think it's important for us to understand that the reason why we were outside MEC Lesufi's offices today is that we know precisely that clauses 4 and 5 of the bill as it stands at the moment has been sponsored by him. That basically indicates that the HOD will now have the power to determine admissions and language policies for any school in that particular province that which they are in HOD. And this is stripping away school governing bodies' powers to determine those admissions and language policies. Let's remember, Vuyo, that the department is an oversight entity, but also is responsible to be a referee where there are instances or challenges. And most importantly, to give strategic direction to schooling, but not to meddle on the day-to-day running of the school. Because they then become a player and a referee in an instance where they are only supposed to intervene in instances where schools may be using those language policies or admission policies to exclude certain learners. Now let's get to the crux of the issue. The reality of the situation is that I've been in the Eastern Cape recently this week, where the HOD and the MEC have basically utilized clause 17 and 21 of the same bill to take away function of the school governing bodies to determine which process is going to be followed in order to appoint a principal and the requirements that they wanted to ensure that that principal has maths and science.
No,
because
but
they had identified a specific...
One second, Mr. Notat. I mean, they cannot possibly use this bill. It's not an act just yet. I mean, still going through the normal processes of piloting legislation.
I'm glad you've clarified that point. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, it's important. It's important to understand that there is existing legislation on this, on the South African Schools Act and the Employer of Educators Act. It just so happens to be that particular section to be amended in clause 17 and 21 of this. But it's existing law that I referred to, Vuyo, on the South African Schools Act and the Employment of Educators Act. Now, these powers have been taken away as a function from school governing bodies because that exists at this point in time, so that a particular individual can be appointed in a post that they don't qualify for. And recently, just 2 days ago, in KZN, they've reported that school governing body powers have been stripped away from schools so that a tender can be given to procure textbooks to a specific company and individual, and that's being investigated. Mm-hmm. Now, the danger of this is that we then have politicians meddling on the day-to-day running of schools rather than schools focusing on good quality education and the outcomes of that.
Okay.
It cannot be that the argument is that kids must play in the playground and all of that. We all want to make sure that there's reconciliation. We live in a country that is free, that is democratic. But the primary mandate of a school is quality education.
Okay.
And the Constitution provides that single medium schools exist in this country. In the Eastern Cape, 18 schools have been piloted for isiXhosa right now. And isiXhosa has proven to improve the reading, the writing, the numeracy, the comprehension, and the language of learners threefold because they are studying in their mother tongue.
Okay.
So it's important for us to be able to distinguish us, doing semantics versus the quality of education that we must be providing for our learners.
Okay. Can I ask you, Mr. Lesufi, to respond to both? One, what Mr. Notata says, the clauses, he says, you were sponsored by you. Did you indeed sponsor those clauses? And are they about what he says they're about?
Thanks. I mean, you can see Mr. Notata is lost, to be quite frank, on this matter. So I've never sponsored any clause. And this bill, maybe it's laziness to read the entire bill. This bill does not include the issue of language and admissions. And when they say they reject this bill, what are they rejecting in particular? If they come here and say, I've sponsored a certain clause, I've never done that. I participated in the meeting like any other thing. And there are issues that we contributed that are not in the bill. We're not making noise. We've accepted the outcome. But let me clarify one or two issues quickly for you. Vuyo, if a parent goes to a school, say World School Waterkloof, and apply to admit it there, and the SGB says the school is full, where must that parent go? And our argument is that the parent must come to the district and to the department so that the department can find alternative placement. So the DA says the final arbiter must be the SGB, which simply means the constitutional right to education must be determined by a SGB. And if the SGB say the school is full, that's the end of that particular child. That particular child must stay at home and not get education, because they don't want the department to intervene on a decision that has been taken by the SGB. And our decision to intervene on the SGB is not to take over the powers of the SGB. We want to check indeed the school is full. We want to check whether there is no alternative school that can place that particular child. And that's the responsibility of the department. We're administrators, we have to do that. It's not interfering with the day-to-day running of the school. Surely not. Because at the beginning of the year, if parents can't get placement at the school, they come to the district. And we can't fold our arms the way DA wants and say, we have no powers. Go and beg that SGB. And if that SGB says the school is full, that's the end. Go and stay at home. It can't be. We are saying there must be a process. And the process that is suggested is very simple. You indeed go to the SGB. The SGB exercises their powers. And if the parent is not happy, you must go and appeal to the HOD. And if the HOD exercises his power or her power and you are not happy, then the parents must go and appeal to the MEC, and the MEC must take a decision. That's what law is all about. So why all SGB formations are not up in arms fighting this particular bill? Why must be a political party that is not participating in the processes, that is not participating in the education space that wants to? The people that are in the space, the SGBs, the teacher formations, are keeping quiet. I'm telling you, equal education, Section 27, are supporting the bill. And they are in the education space. They understand this particular space. Lastly, which is very, very important, when this bill was formulated, the DA was represented by their MEC. I sat in that meeting. And the MEC for education from Western Cape did oppose. The technical team that crafted the bill, came from the HOD of the Western Cape and participated in the crafting of the bill. Why craft a bill, participate in decision-making, when it's about to go to Parliament, you come and make noise? It really puzzled us. And you want to identify an MEC to say the MEC of Education in Gauteng is the one that is sponsoring a certain clause or some clauses. It's not true. But also go to the Constitutional Court judgment. If not that, I can go and read that judgment. That judgment explicitly states that the HOD of the department is the final arbiter on decision of admissions. If they can't challenge that in the Constitutional Court, they want to challenge it outside my office. Who am I to change that Constitutional Court judgment? So it's clear the DA missed the boat. They realized very late, but they're losing support in their communities, especially Afrikaner communities, and they felt to target me, it will reignite their support because they think that I'm anti-Africans. I'm not anti-Africans. I'm not anti-mother tongue. I'm saying you can teach all these children under one school, and all of them can play together, study together, and play and be educated together. If they can do that in a lecture hall in a university, why can't they do that at the primary or secondary school? And that's our argument.
Okay, Mr. Notada, we are not. You're not denying or dismissing the reality that it has happened across our nation where certain schools or people used language to exclude people.
Look, I think, first of all, the MEC might be missing the boat and maybe you might not have comprehended the bill as it stands at the moment. Because the specific clauses of 4 and 5 that I speak to do not speak about school governing bodies retaining their powers. It explicitly indicates that the people that will determine admissions and language policies are the HOD with an appeal mechanism to the MEC. So that is not even something that we're dilly-dallying about. Secondly, there are various civil society organizations that have opposed this bill. It doesn't come from the air. It's not just a political party issue. There are various civil society organizations that oppose this bill. There are homeschool society organizations that oppose this bill. There are ECD representatives that oppose this bill on various miscellaneous issues on the bill. So it cannot be just it's made that we just got this thing out of the air. Second thing, we are just to come to your question. The reality is that it's not necessarily about schools not being able to provide a good quality education and learning studying under one roof. But the reality is that there are less and less good quality schools, and we're not investing in mother tongue education to make sure that in Gauteng, those that want to study in Tsonga are able to study in Tsonga, in Tswana, in Sesotho, to do physical science or maths in those particular languages. And what parents are then doing, they are going out looking for schools that are able to provide that good quality education. And this particular clauses are then kind of blinding us of the real issues in the sector. That almost 94% of schools in Gauteng that are either dual medium or provide English or Afrikaans schools are there and they exist, but they don't provide this quality mother tongue education. And then 6% of the schools that are in Gauteng were then saying that, no, we must change them from a single medium school because everybody must study under one roof. Whereas the real problem is that there is no good schools that provide good quality education, that these learners can be able to study in their mother tongue, so that if Ufunokwenza maths in your mother tongue, you're able to do it. Physical science in your mother tongue, you're able to do it. But then we must attack and scapegoat these schools that are actually performing well. But at the end of the day, we must not run away from the real issues in the education sector. And I think the MEC must also be able to target those particular issues and be dealing with them, particularly, and enhancing mother tongue education, rather than saying that we will target single medium schools. The Constitution provides that single medium schools exist because they provide good quality education. Look at any matrix in the world that have measured how mother tongue education has got an effect on quality education.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave. Let me thank both of you for coming through this evening. And that's Mr. Notata, who is, of course, the DA's shadow Minister of Education, as well as MEC Panyazal Sufi, who is the MEC of Education here in Gauteng. The DA marched on him, or his office, today to raise the issues that Mr. Notata was talking about. To this now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's disturbed at what he calls the politicization of the Marikana issue.
Disturbingly is the ongoing politicization of this tragedy, leading to the unfair targeting and isolated allocation of responsibility to the president. Others have sought to create a false impression that President Ramaphosa bears liability for the killings. In having applied his mind to the judgment, President Ramaphosa welcomes the judgment of the High Court, which held that the plaintiff's particulars of claim were legally flawed in a series of respects. The High Court agreed with the President's arguments and held that the plaintiffs had not established that the President bore any legal duty in relation to the Marikana tragedy. Furthermore, the court made no finding that the President was in fact the cause of harmful conduct. The proceedings were not a trial, and no evidence was led. The court was merely engaged in a legal debate regarding whether the plaintiff's allegations complied with the law. The court rejected the plaintiff's argument that certain email communications from President Ramaphosa sought to call for the murder of the striking workers. The judgment stated that the plaintiff's argument against the president, open quote, is not only far-fetched but also irreconcilable within the context of the email communication contents as a whole, close quote. The High Court agreed with the president that there was no factual basis pleaded for the allegation that collusion between the president, the government, and the senior police will have led to deaths of workers.
Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya there from that statement that the presidency issued yesterday. Now, in terms of that High Court ruling delivered last Friday, the president has a case to answer. One of the judges, Fritz van Oosten, found that the president had taken part in, planned and endorsed cooperation between lawmen and the police, which then culminated in the deaths, injuries, arrests, and detention of the striking mine workers back in August 2012. You will recall that 34 striking miners were gunned down on that fateful day when police opened fire at them near the Lonmin Platinum Marikana mine in Marikana. Ramaphosa served on the Lonmin board at the time. Of course, many of you will know that Lonmin is now, or was bought by Sibanye Stillwater. That is now what the company is called. Of course, in just over a month, we will be commemorating the 10th anniversary of the massacre. So what's happening on the ground? We are, of course, joined on the line by Christina Mdau, who is the Secretary, Mining Host Communities in Crisis Network. And we also joined here in studio by Sabati.
Mr. Asenati,
sorry. Apologies for that. Thanks to both of you for agreeing to come through. Just from what you know, what you've been hearing as we are getting closer to, the commemorations, what are people talking about? What are people saying about, how the past 10 years has been?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mvogo, and thank you for having us in the show. The past 10 years, counting this year, of course, have been over the same conversations. We've had the same issues. Clients have been decrying the lack of justice. Clients have been decrying the lack of accountability around Marikana, the lack of acknowledgement around Marikana. In the 10 years, all of the issues that they were adamantly raising in the 2012 strike, all of them still remain persistent, still remain issues on the ground in Marikana. So the last 10 years has been 10 years of lack of accountability, 10 years of lack of justice, no acknowledgement of the massacre and the losses that happened as a result of the massacre.
Christina, from your vantage point?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Watchdog, for having a community from Marikana, the affected community. It's so sad that even after 10 years, nothing has changed. Even after 10 years, whereby many people have died, after 10 years, whereby something has happened, but even now, our children cannot understand. They don't know that something has happened because nothing shows if something happened. Only commemoration of those who didn't get affected directly because they don't understand. But for those who were affected directly, this is very sad because there's no sign, there is nothing showing or nothing that has been implemented to show that something has happened. So it's so sad because exactly on the spot where Marikana massacre happened, it's like a grazing land for the animals. It's like a place whereby it is senseless. It doesn't show that humanity was violated, humanity was destroyed. So we hope maybe one day, yes, it is after 10 years, but we hope one day something can change because we are here as the Mining Host Communities in Crisis Network, and we aim to strengthen the violations, to strengthen the human rights violations. So through the laws that are protecting humanity. So we think, yes, through the help of different organizations and the law that protects human rights, we can get somewhere. Thank you.
Well, Christian, I mean, it's not just about human rights. I mean, only last week we were talking here, we had a panel here on the program talking about the report, on the back of the report by, is it Wamua, who were looking at whether and how mining communities which we represent were benefiting from, the activities of the people who have invested in these mines. And the report was quite scathing Christina, where, I mean, projects were not completed, some weren't even started, and all the things that were promised, especially on the back of the Marikana report about, you know, things that these mining companies should be helping communities with. Those things, they're not delivering on those things.
Yes, nothing has been delivered. Nothing has happened, actually. I will tell you that here in Maritlogwa, we were relocated at 2008 by the mine Tarisa Minerals. And we were relocated with zinc houses for the mine to mine very fast. Then they will come back and do something better for us. And you'll be surprised that we are voting, and it shows that it's a residential place, but nothing is being implemented. There are paper documents that are SLPs, social labor plans, but nothing has happened. Nothing is happening. Nothing. You know, I can tell you that we, the affected communities, mining affected communities, we are the most vulnerable communities, because everyone is here to take something. Everyone is here to have shares. Everyone is here to do business. And they forget the aim and the purpose that they asked the Department of DMRE that we will comply with this, we will do this, we will help like this. But the most affected communities are the most vulnerable due to the mine, because on the 11th of March, the mine, Tarisa mine, they blast in our community in less than 150 meters away from our houses where we were relocated. And believe me when I tell you that the mine officials, they were here together with their security to forcefully evacuate us for them to blast. But we are in the residential place. They are from the mining place, but we were forcefully evacuated for the mine to blast. We refused because now we understand better that this is wrong. This is not supposed to happen like this. And we were assaulted. They brutally assaulted us. They pepper sprayed us. They came with shields. Imagine police, ex-police, they are Tarisa security personnel. They came with shield to brutally assault us. I am one of the victims. So it shows that compliance is nothing. And the departments that are supposed to protect us, they are the one killing us. The stakeholders that are supposed to protect us, they are the one killing us, because everything is happening in their presence.
Okay. Asenati, I mean, how have, let me ask this way, has Sibanye Stillwater delivered on both the outstanding stuff with regard to payments, for example, and how are communities approaching this anniversary in a month's time?
Just before that, I just want to highlight something that my dear colleagues just mentioned here, that there is very little regard for compliance, whether it's compliance with statutory provisions or compliance with corporate social responsibility.
In fact, the report I was talking about said as much.
Exactly. You will remember that there was a social labor plan, as my colleague mentions, of 2006. That Lonmin was part of. They ratified and they acknowledged, and they actually agreed that they would implement the contents of that social labor practice.
Did they?
Which among other requirements, they promised to build 5,000 houses for their mine workers. By the time they had to account on that requirement, they had not even gotten close to 10% of that requirement. So there's very little compliance with those kind of requirements. At the same time, I also want to just comment on the issue of wages. The gist of the strike in 2012 was around wages, and infamously the 12,500 rands issue. But above and beyond that, there were also issues around labor relations with the mine issues around working conditions, the health and safety, occupational safety of the workers, and all of those issues, including wages, haven't been properly addressed. You will remember that the 12,500 was only reached a few years after the Marikana strike, at a time when 12,500 didn't even hold the same value as it had in 2012. Even today, we can confidently say that miners are among the least paid workers in the country for comparing the work that they do and how they contribute to the GDP. So there's so many issues around that. We can conclude to say that the mine hasn't fully complied and adhered to their corporate social responsibility. If you drive around and take a trip to Marikana, you will see that mine workers who are the backbone of the mine are living in shacks. They are living in a informally established community. You get there, you will hear about Marikana village, and when you actually see the conditions that they live in, you realize that these are informally set up villages, and it's against the social labor plan that the mine had rectified and agreed to. So there's just so many issues around the mine taking care of its employees as their primary human resource. But beyond that, there's also issues of government not coming on board, government not providing the right form of justice that the workers want. The biggest issue was the issue of acknowledgement and apology. Our clients have always been hell-bent on the issue of apology because it gives them the acknowledgement that Marikana is understood for what it is.
In fact,
the president.
I'm glad you mentioned it very, very quickly. We have run out of time.
Yeah.
Do you think there's appetite on the ground on the back of the court ruling last week, where it was said that the president has a case to answer? Do you think there's more appetite now? People feel sort of more confident that they can press on with those particular demands about an apology and, of course, about compensation?
Indeed there is. And while there's aspects of the judgment that we are not happy with, we feel like on the parts where there's elements of liability on the president in relation to Marikana, that is something to hold on to in driving the quest for justice. And at the same time, we are disappointed at the issue around the apology and how it was handled by the court and by the president through his articulations.
Okay, let's leave it there.
I wish we had more time.
I wish we had the time. Thanks, though, to both of you for coming through. Asenati Tugela, who is a lawyer representing some of the Marikana community, as well as Christina Mdau, who is the secretary for the support group organization Mining Host Communities in Crisis. And that's our show for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow night, same time. Have a good night.